Welcome to our Moving to Singapore Forum. My name is John Makarian, and I'm the founder of the Expatland Global Network. The Expatland Global Network is a community of service providers in key cities around the world, which delivers services to expats, helping them settle into their new city and leave their own city. And it's my pleasure today to be hosting today's forum, and I will be introducing you shortly to our panel of experts. It's my pleasure to introduce Bronwyn Small, the Business Development Director from EDSG. Hi, Bronwyn.
Hi, John. Thanks to everyone for attending today's forum. Today, I will be discussing all the exciting education opportunities for families that are arriving in Singapore. So Singapore has got two different categories of school. On the one hand, we have Singapore government schools. These are run by the Ministry of Education. And on the other hand, we have Singapore international schools. The government schools traditionally prove challenging for foreigners to get admission to. And for this reason, foreigners look to international school as a solution for providing schooling for their children while they are in Singapore. Singapore international schools are extremely diverse in terms of the curriculum that they offer, as well as the sports, the cultural, music, art programs. There are over 50 different curriculum options that families can choose from, as well as up to 250 different kinds of sports. There are also a wide range of different language options. So from comprehensive bilingual programs to a rich selection in terms of second language options. The benefit of such a diverse education landscape is that families have the choice of choosing a school which they feel will best suit their child. In terms of an overview of the Singapore international schools, the Singapore schools outperform the global IB average. So this is when we look at the average scores of students leaving school in Singapore. The average IB score in Singapore is substantially higher than that of the global IB average. Singapore international schools also enjoy a really diverse student population. So some schools can boast 80 different nationalities within one school. So that's really a benefit for families coming into an international school environment. So the families already get that exposure from children all over the world. So sometimes in a classroom of 24 children, you can have 15 different nationalities represented, and that all adds to the international experience that families have. Again, we have sports, music, and co-curricular activities are now resuming once seeing now that the COVID restrictions have been lifted. So for the past 2 years, those have been relatively restricted, but with all the changes in the COVID restrictions, we're seeing those activities resume. A benefit of Singapore international schools is the island-wide bus service. So this provides families with a lot of flexibility as they are not required to live particularly close to the school, as well as the convenience of having a bus coming to collect your kids and drop them off at your house or condo in the afternoons. The schools in Singapore have really good English language support programs for students that are not speaking English. So if your child has a first language other than English, the schools in Singapore are really well geared up in terms of supporting children in terms of bringing their English up to a native English speaker. The schools also offer academic support. So if there are any learning gaps that your child may have, as well as any difficulties as a result of the school closures over the past 2 years, the schools are really well equipped to deal with that. And the school also has really good bilingual language options. So for instance, if you wanted your child to be immersed in a second language other than English, there are opportunities for that. Secondly, there are also a lot of like a rich second language selection which families can make for their children. Right, so the international school search. So thanks to COVID, this process has actually been made a lot easier for families. So in the past, families would have to travel to Singapore in order to visit schools and see what they were like. But obviously with the travel restrictions from the past 2 years, the schools have adjusted their processes, and they now facilitate really comprehensive virtual school visits. So this provides families the opportunity of having obtaining a comprehensive idea of what the school can offer, as well as meeting some of the school staff whilst from the comfort of their home. So what we do, so now that borders are opening, we are using the virtual tours as a way of helping us build a really concise short list of schools to visit, should you wish to visit Singapore before you arrive for your actual move. Similarly, so some schools may require assessments for children before they'll confirm enrollment. So many of these assessments are also now facilitated online. Now, the admission process into Singapore international schools is simple. The visa is not actually required at the point of application. So when you make the application for your child, you simply need a passport, a birth certificate, and 2 years of school reports. The visa will need to be submitted before your child actually starts school, but the school will be able to reserve a seat for your child before you actually have the visa. And then in the case of a student visa, the school will actually make that application on behalf of your family. Yes, so in summary, so schools in Singapore provide foreign families with a rich selection of programs. So families can really choose the program that best suits their child. So that is one of the major advantages of moving to Singapore with your children.
Thank you, Bronwyn. That's some great information. And obviously, everybody, these slides will be available for you all later to download. It's now my great pleasure to introduce PJ Roberts, Managing Director of the Australian International School, part of Cognita. And PJ, please kindly tell us a bit more about education in Singapore.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Bronwyn, for that introduction around the macro landscape of education. So just a little bit of background on myself initially. I've now been the Managing Director at the Australian International School for 4 years. So 1 year was pre-COVID, the last few years in COVID, which has obviously been a little bit challenging, a little bit difficult in the international school network and for expats overall. But overall, I've been in Singapore now for 20 years. So I speak with an absolute love and adoration for my time here. So in relation to that, and just on the next slide, you'll see a little bit more around the scope of Cognita. So the Australian International School is a part of a global group of schools, a global family of schools called Cognita. And basically we have 86 schools in 11 countries across 3 continents, which totals about 59,000 students. As you can see there, we have a presence there in Asia, Europe and the Middle East, and Latin America. And overall what that means is that we do build distinct harmonisation and symmetry across the schools in operations as well as best practice education. So there's a lot of insight sharing when you look at that. Obviously the ownership structure of schools in Singapore is very different when you look at the international school landscape, as Bronwyn referenced. And us being a part of Cognita, we find is a real true benefit. I'll cover off the schools specifically in Singapore a little bit later on. On the next slide, you'll have a little bit more of a view around what we aim to achieve as a part of being a school within the Cognita framework. The vision is to be an inspiring world of education, and that is building self-belief and empowering individuals to succeed. And basically what we see, particularly in the international school network, there is significant diversity, as Bronwyn mentioned. At the Australian International School specifically, we have over 50 nationalities that attend our school. So you can see from that perspective, there's children coming to the school in different stages of their journey, and being K to 12, and in many ways we start at infant care when we look at that, which is 2 months old, all the way through to year 12. And depending on expatriates' time in Singapore, we may have children at our school for 6 months, we may have children out of school for their entire education process, and then we have a number of students that join somewhere in between. So that real focus on the individual, that real focus on those individual education pathways is absolutely imperative in that international school network. The objective to be the best and most admired global schools group, which is really important to us. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more around actually specifically who we are in Asia. And the next slide has a few data points specifically around how that sits. So in Asia specifically, we have over 2,900 staff. 38% of our staff actually work here in Singapore. So Singapore, from that perspective, is our biggest presence. Our staff consist of individuals from over 40 different nationalities. And again, that is a strategic approach in relation to our employee demographic needs to mirror, obviously, what our student and our parent demographic. So that's a really important approach that we adopt. Of those total staff, 58% are teaching staff, with 42% specifically non-teaching staff. And that's a reflection of the importance that Cognita does place on not only the education proposition, but the operation structure that needs to occur around that. And that's certainly something that we've seen real value in during COVID-19, and what schools have needed to operate in a very different environment. There's needed to be obviously the safe entry, there's been the check-ins, there's been the ring fencing of year groups, there's been the additional support that's had to be required there. So in relation to that snapshot, as we mentioned, specifically in Asia, there are those 13 schools. On the next slide, it just provides a little bit more of a framework in relation to how we approach education. As I mentioned, the purpose is to create an inspiring world of education, and the key word there is certainly inspiring, to inspire children to be the very best they can be and the very best version of themselves. The education framework is based around academic excellence, developing individual character and the values of the child. And if we look at obviously the geopolitical risk and concerns that's going on around the world at the moment, we can certainly see how important building individual character and values is important in today's society. And that's linked in directly with building a global perspective. And that global perspective, again, is absolutely crucial. When we look at Singapore, particularly as a country, we look at the schools and the diversity that exists in international schools, having that global perspective is absolutely essential. And then how we do that is through energized leadership, personalized learning, people growth, community innovation, and brilliant basics. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit around the connectivity that can exist between the schools, not only across Singapore, but across Asia and globally. And the benefit of this, like any company that has a global presence or a regional presence, your ability to harness those insights, to be able to share best practice and to continually improve together on this journey is a real strength of being a part of Cognita, we find. As I mentioned, in Singapore, there are 3 schools. There's the Australian International School, there's Stanford American International School and Brighton College. We're basically 1 kilometre away from each other. We exist in Serangoon. So the ability for us to leverage insights from each other for the benefit of our students and our parents is vast and really beneficial. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more specifically about who we are in Singapore. The next slide covers off a little bit more information around the Australian International School, which is obviously where I'm the managing director. So the school is an established, prestigious school in Singapore. As Bronwyn mentioned, there is significant choice in the international school environment. With the Australian International School, we are 30 years in existence next year. That is an established school in Singapore, which is really important. We run from infant care through to year 12. We have approximately 2,400 students. Prior to COVID, that was around 3,000. So you can see from a market environment how that has impacted. But we are certainly seeing, and Bronwyn mentioned that, we are certainly seeing momentum pick up in the market significantly, which is really beneficial. We have over 50 student nationalities. The other key points I'd like to mention there is that the quality of the teaching and learning in relation to our employees, for our teachers in relation to their qualifications, and particularly the curriculum. We have great diversity in curriculum. Even though the Australian International School is Australia by name, it is very much an international environment with an international curriculum as well, We have the IB in the primary years. We've got the IB diploma. We have HSC in the senior years. And we also offer IGCSE, which is a British curriculum in year 9 and 10, which is a really important average of that. The other component which I'd like to mention there is particularly around the academic results. Our academic results last year were the best in relation to the school. We had 3 perfect scores for the IB, which was exceptional. And one of those students, Archie Manzies, actually his mum and dad were teachers at the school, and he spent his entire education at AIS. So it was a wonderful testament to the quality of the teaching there. On the next slide, you've got the opportunity here to view another one of our schools, which is Brighton College. Brighton College is in its infancy. It was established in 2020, and it currently runs from pre-prep till year 8. So it's a very intimate college. Brighton is a very well-respected college in Britain, and we've been able to obviously mirror that in that approach over here. Again, excellent quality of teaching and learning. The curriculum, a very strong British curriculum, which is really, really important, and really focusing on the holistic development of the kids. And in the Honey Kids International School Awards recently was announced as the best new school and the best small school. So again, different to AIS in size and curriculum, but again, depending on the profile of the parents, depending on what's best for the family and the student, you've got 2 very good options there. The third option that you have in Singapore is the Stanford American International School. And this was established in 2008, similar to AIS, runs from infant care to grade 12, has approximately 2,800 students, very diverse in nationalities with over 75. And again, diversity in relation to the curriculum offered there. Excels in, and a real proposition is obviously the bilingual program, drama and digital literacy, which are really important points in schools. So if I'm just to wrap that up before I pass it back to you there, John, first of all, congratulations if you're thinking about relocating to Singapore or moving to Singapore. As I've mentioned, I've been here 20 years. I've grown up, I've spent a lot of my adult life in Singapore. It does afford wonderful opportunities. And from an education perspective, you really do have significant choice for good quality schools. We'd love the fact if you're looking at a school that you do approach one of our schools. Again, the diversity, and that's the reason for Cognita embracing these different schools in Singapore, is you've got different diversity, you've got different demographics, and you've got different curriculum. So you really do have significant choice. And as you go on that journey of finding a school for your child or children, it is about finding what the best option is. And you've got significant choice here in Singapore. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you, John.
Thank you, PJ. That was a wonderful overview of AIS and Cognita. And I can only echo your thoughts about what a nice place Singapore is to live. So it's a pleasure now to introduce Ronald Chun, Business Development Director from Echelon Global Services, to tell us a little bit more about immigration and what you need to do in order to come and live and work in Singapore. So over to you, Ronald.
Thanks, John. Hello, everyone. The topic that we'll be covering today are the types of passes Singapore is offering. For those of you coming over either to work or for businesses, there are 4 types of different passes being offered. They are the employment pass, S pass, and work permits, which is usually applied under companies. The entree pass and the PEP is usually applicable individually, which depends on what kind of work you would like to conduct in Singapore. Different passes have different sets of qualifying criteria, and some of you might be aware that the qualifying criteria for the employment pass will have some changes this coming September. I will touch more on that in the coming slides. For those whom are planning to bring your family over, there are mainly 2 types of passes, the dependent pass and also the long-term visit pass. Eligible spouses and children can also opt for the pre-approved letter of consent, which is applied mainly by the employer. This pass will enable them to be lawfully employed in Singapore. There are 4 criteria for an EP application. One of it, the education criteria, states that the applicant's qualification has to be obtained from an accredited institution or certificates from institutions that are not in the MOM's list. The application has to go through another set of verification. As for the salary criteria, the applicant needs to earn a fixed salary of no less than 4,500 Singapore dollars for those not in the financial industry, and a minimum of 5,000 Singapore dollars for those in the finance sector. A minimum job posting of 28 days are required by MOM as they are practicing Fair Consideration Framework, FCF, which serves to be fair to the locals and PRs. Self-assessment tool, SAT, has to be complied by the hiring employer prior to the submission of the application. This will roughly gauge what type of pass the applicant is eligible to apply. Exemptions of job postings are given to employees and companies who has 10 employees and below, or the applicant is drawing a fixed salary of more than 20,000 Singapore dollars. Intra-corporate transferees or vacancies that are filled for less than a month are also exempted from job posting. Starting from 1st December 2022, the minimum fixed monthly salary for an EP application will be increased to 5,000 and 5,500 respectively. As for the Compass compliance, it shall be based on 4 foundational criteria. This will be divided into individual attributes and firm-related attributes. 40 points are required to pass Compass compliance. Otherwise, applicants can make up on the application by scoring bonuses points from another two criteria. Okay, bonus points can be scored if the individual expertise falls into the shortage occupational list, mainly in the finance sector, manufacturing and construction industry, healthcare, and IT and digital media, tourism, and last but not least, the retail industry. Bonus point can be obtained if the firm who has partnership with the government on ambitious innovation or internationalization activities. Exemption on the Compass compliance are still given to individuals who qualifies under the salary range, term of stay, or if they are an ICT. In conclusion, with the reopening of borders, we do believe that there will be an influx of foreign talent, which is why the government of Singapore are implementing new regulation such as Compass starting September this year. Our advice is plan ahead. If you have plans moving forward, if you have plans moving to Singapore this coming year or the near future, move your plans before the new implementation kicks in. We at EGS are here for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronald. The situation is opening up, and I remember traveling when I moved to Singapore in 2004. It was a much simpler process, but I think people are in good hands if they reach out to you. I would also like to remind everyone listening, please feel free to use the chat function to send in questions for our Q&A, which will be coming up after Boon Tan's tax presentation. But now I'd like to invite the founder of Sir Moving, Charlie Scott, to give us an overview on some of the moving logistics, getting goods to Singapore. And I know, Charlie, there's been a lot of developments recently coming out of COVID. So please, looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Well, thanks, John. That's very interesting, like topics that we've just been like listening to, with especially, with the changes in employment passes and the salary levels that you've got to hit. But for the moving side, it's actually good, that COVID has started to go ahead and wane a little bit, which means that, we're going to see more people hopefully coming to Singapore. And I know that like Hong Kong has been exodus, from there. And I think Singapore is going to see the benefits of that, for people moving in. Who we are? Well, basically, we're a moving company, but we deal a lot in international moving, in and out of Singapore. We do domestic services. We air courier, like service. We move pets, so really a whole like gamut of moving. So, but for people moving into Singapore, there is like quite a few things that you would like have to know, and then through my slides, hopefully we can go ahead and guide you, getting a better idea of how to handle your move. Big problem, that we're seeing right now, though, is the shipping side of it. With the port congestion, that's and the unavailability of the containers, just means it's really difficult to go ahead, and sort of plan any move. Before pre-COVID, we were able to go ahead, and like, give you a virtual guarantee on when you could receive your shipment, say into Singapore. But now it's very difficult to go ahead and get, containers or vessels at a good price as well. So the shipping rates have gone up tremendously, 5-6 times. So it means that, you maybe have to go ahead and be a little bit frugal, on what items that you would like to take to Singapore. I've been in this business now for 36 years. And I've got see people's things, if they're going to be coming in or leaving, they'll go ahead and bring their snow skis, so, but that's probably not a good idea, to go ahead and take those if you're going to be paying a lot of money for it. So shipping rates, they change every 2 weeks, so that quotation that you're going to get might not be the quotation that you will go ahead and pay, because the shipping companies have, just gone ahead and they do what they want, as far as the shipping rates are concerned. So you'd have to go ahead and discuss that, and then probably try and tie, your moving company when you're going to be leaving, to see if you can get a rate and a quotation that's going to be fixed. It's unlikely because the rates change every 2 weeks. Reducing costs, well, so like people say, what can I do, to go ahead? I mean, basically, the only way to reduce these costs is to reduce the volume that you're shipping. Having a good spring clean, is probably the best way, to go ahead and do that. Again, people have asked, is it worthwhile to go ahead and put your goods in storage, and then maybe wait until the ocean freight rates come down? Well, it's been 2 years and they still haven't come down. So it's a lot of money in storage. And then, of course, you have to go ahead and look at, you keep your goods in storage, but what damage are they going to be having in storage if you keep them in storage for 6 months or a year? Definitely mold and mildew is a concern. Material wise, for sofas or any fabrics, that will be a problem, to go ahead and keep those, and then keep them in the shape, that you would like them to be in when they arrive. So there's the storage costs as well. So that's going to cost you a bit more, and if the shipping rates don't go down, then you're going to be paying more money, for storage. So it's a difficult one to go ahead and advise. Probably just take, the items that you would need with you, and based on where you're going to live as well, because a lot of it in Singapore is going to be condo living. So again, most of the new condos are smaller than maybe what you're used to living in at home. So that's another concern. Next slide, please. Hello? Okay. Yeah, planning and preparation is very important, for your move. It really is. It's set realistic expectations, so, look at 3 months before, you actually move is a good time frame to go ahead and start planning your move. Call in your moving company, have the surveys done, get 2 or 3 quotations, or if the company is going to be handling the move, then they may go through the relocation company. So generally, there would be 3 quotations that you would normally get, just to keep the pricing and to let you know what the other competition is doing, and then obviously decide, on the one that you either feel comfortable with, or you've had good referrals. Again, with the shipping, it's very difficult. So your quotation may go ahead and be okay for July or August, but if you're moving in September, then the shipping companies are going to go ahead and change the rates. Normally every 2 weeks at the moment, so it really is difficult. The shipping lines also, they go ahead, and bump people's goods because they reckon that household goods are not the important thing, so they go to the bottom of the list, so That's another sort of like, you know, sort of like thing. So that may cost you more money as well. So it's not a cheap thing moving these days. So, but all the moving companies are affected the same. We all pay the same shipping rates. So it's a difficult time at the moment, you know. So hopefully with the port congestion issues, hopefully they'll go ahead and free up some more containers and some more vessels, and then that'll be hopefully, you know, an indicator that the prices will start to come down. Shipping, yeah, we ship all over the world. We sort of like bring in sort of like, you know, shipments from all over the world. And if you're looking at timings, you know, again, you know, obviously you've seen that sort of like there, Europe, Middle East, Africa. For instance, Dubai to Singapore, the sailing time is 12 days. Europe, it's going to be 30, 36 days. Africa, it's going to be around sort of like 18 days to 23 days. From the Americas, yeah, 21 to 42. And then Asia Pacific, 3 days to Thailand, or Thailand to Singapore, and Hong Kong, 5 days. So, you know, there's a variety of sort of like, you know, shipping times, and, you know, different vessels have got different days to arrive at the destination here. Personal moving checklist, always a good thing, you know, because, you know, you have to be reminded to go ahead and do things, you know, which is like a simple thing, is like change your bank account, you know. So, but you know, there's so much to think about, you know, when you're actually coming to a new country. You know, you've got 101 things, you know, you've got to decide which school, you know, you're going to go to. So, you know, for just really running through this very quickly, you know, just pick up a change of address kit from the post office. Just like do that, just so that you can go ahead and advise people of your change of address. Take a look around the house, start to think about what you do want and don't want to take with you. So that again is important. Bit of spring cleaning, you know, it's like is very helpful, you know, before you go ahead and sort of like get your moving company to come in and do a survey. Prepare the list of what you want to go ahead and move. You know, you've got to sort of like start a new bank account at your destination. You've got to close off your other bank account. Contact your child's new school, notify them of your upcoming move to their area. So, you know, that's a lot of things you can do very much, you know, on sort of like the internet these days, because we can do video surveys very easily through WhatsApp. So, you know, it just makes it a lot easier, you know, for people moving. Documents, vital documents, you know, sort of like marriage licenses and birth certificates, you know, and you know, anything you need, you know, that would sort of like be, you know, your important documents, you know, gather those, because you would generally go ahead and take those with you. Make arrangements to disconnect the utilities, get any refunds, deposits back, you know, and then obviously give them sort of like something, you know, an address to forward the final bill. If you can make arrangements to connect the utilities at your new residence, but again, that would normally be handled by, you know, the real estate agent, you know, that you're going to be using to find your property. Check with your insurance company about sort of like transferring coverage. You may be able to do that, but what I've found is that there's not so many people go ahead and take contents insurance for, you know, the properties here. Maybe it's because they think, you know, that Singapore is perfectly safe and there's no chance of any robberies. But that's your own decision to go ahead and sort of like decide whether you would like contents insurance. And then another good thing is arrange to have, you know, somebody to come and maybe watch your children on the moving day, because it gets a bit stressful. Yeah. So that would be another one, you know, that you would have to be reminded on. Again, dispose or drain. This is all just like, you know, quite straightforward things that you would normally go ahead and do anyway. But it just, the personal moving checklist is very important, because then you can check everything off. Yeah. Plan what goes in the airplane with you. and effectively just like, go ahead and go through the moving checklist. Oh, there you go. Defrost, clean, and this is one day before you move. Clean your kitchen and get everything ready. So that personal checklist, as I said, it's a very good thing. Coming to Singapore, importing your goods into Singapore, fairly straightforward. It normally takes 3 to 4 days from the time the vessel arrives until we can get the container or your goods to your residence. What we do is that we'll do all the unwrapping and unpacking, take away all the boxes and things there for you. If you need a handyman, if you need to assemble beds, bunk beds, that type of thing, the guys will go ahead and arrange that for you. Really, it's what we are part of, the Expatland, group company, and we normally work a lot with the Expatland members. We are members of the FIDI network, which is like the global network, and it's the most respected moving network, in the world. So that's important, because we do get audited, financially we get audited on the quality of the work that we do. We get audited on the responses, the communication, the paperwork, So if anybody is going to be moving, to Singapore, and you would like a little bit of help from Sir Move Services, most happy to go ahead and answer any questions and things that you may have. And and if you are coming to Singapore, it's a great place. As PJ said, he's been here over 20 years. Well, this is my 39th year. So I came in 1983 and basically loved the place, So, and then I meet good people like John Markarian, for instance, So, but no, if any questions or anybody needs anything, let me know.
Thank you, Charlie. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and particularly when you're going to say nice things about me.
Thanks.
So, just a lot of information there, which Charlie's happy to talk to you about. Now it's time for one of my favorite topics, which is taxation. We have today Boon Tan, Managing Director of CST Accountants and Advisors, himself an expat who has been there for a number of years now. So Boon, please share with us some thoughts on Singapore taxation and doing business in Singapore.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, everyone. A little bit about, as John said, a little bit about me. I am a Aussie expat, born and raised in Sydney, moved up 6 years ago and thoroughly enjoying the experience. I am, together with Charlie, one of the 2 group leaders in our Singapore E-team. Married, have a son, Jared, and he is age 6 and currently attending the Australian International School. So I can firsthand give a testimonial as to the enjoyment and quality of the service that Cognita, especially through AIS, have been giving my son. CST, we've been in Singapore now since 2004, and our key area of expertise is helping people come and go around the world. So provision of inbound and outbound tax advice, inbound in the case of our topic today, and helping people navigate that minefield of leaving their jurisdiction and arriving here in Singapore. As you'll see in the first slide, the Singapore tax system is a territorial tax system. And what that means is that Singapore will only tax you on income which is sourced in Singapore. So that means that, as a lot of you might have, your assets which generate income in your home jurisdiction are actually not taxable in Singapore, because Singapore does not tax foreign income, because it's not sourced here. A very layman's definition of source is the place where the income is generated. And so from an individual's perspective, that's generally where they are employed. And if you're employed in Singapore, you're going to be taxable on your Singapore income. So foreign income is not taxed, even if it's brought into the country. So if you've got a investment portfolio and dividends are paid in, let's say, Australia or America, you can bring that income after you've paid tax in your home jurisdiction into Singapore, and it still won't be taxable. And that's an important element because, you know, it can often be useful to have that additional top up from your home income sources outside of Singapore with regards to your living expenses here. Investment income in general is not taxable in Singapore, and that's even applicable if you have investments here in Singapore. So if you have a bank account which is earning interest, a term deposit with a Singapore bank, as an individual, you're not going to be taxed on that. There's also no capital gains tax in Singapore, which is a very interesting point and does bring up some opportunities for tax planning for a lot of individuals who may be entrepreneurs starting their own business and looking to establish a global footprint. So in Singapore, when you sell a capital asset, such as shares in your stock portfolio, or your home or an investment property, that is not taxable in Singapore. Every year, the Singapore income year is the calendar year. So just like America, it's 1 January through to 31 December. And your tax return will be due in the middle of April every year. And there's two ways of doing your tax return. You either do it online through what the Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore have called the My Tax portal, or you can do a paper return, which is due a little bit earlier. Now going into the next slide, which is about residency. So tax residency in Singapore is very well defined. And generally, if you are here for more than 183 days in the year, you are deemed to be a tax resident of Singapore. But generally speaking, from experience, what we find is that if you are a holder of a working visa, such as an employment pass, an entrepreneur pass, for example, or one of those other S passes that Ronald went through, the date that you receive that will effectively be the date that, from a Singapore perspective, you'll be regarded as being a tax resident of Singapore. And therefore, you'll be taxed on all your Singapore-sourced income from that day forth. Now, we're here in April. Some of you may be looking at making the move, and you're going to come towards the second half of the year, maybe end of Q3, start of Q4, 2022. And you might think, well, okay, I'm not going to be here for more than 183 days. The point about the work permits and the holding of a valid work pass is where it overcomes that shortfall in regards to not being here for 183 days. Now, a key point really here to note as individuals is ensuring that you get the advice before you leave and understanding what you need to do to extinguish your tax residency status in your home jurisdiction, because you will clearly not want to be in a position where your income in Singapore is taxable in both jurisdictions because you haven't got your exit right on your home jurisdiction before you arrive in Singapore. So looking at what is then regarded as taxable income in Singapore and how it's taxed, before that, how it's taxed, a key component of the Singapore tax system is its low rates compared to many other jurisdictions around the world. there is a sliding scale of tax rate, which starts from 2% up to 22%, with the maximum tax rate, the highest tax rate of 22%, kicking in at approximately 300,000 Sing dollars. So if you think about tax rates for individuals in jurisdictions like Australia, the UK, the USA, Canada, you very quickly see that the actual tax position or the effective tax rate for an individual in Singapore as a Singaporean tax resident is significantly lower than some of those jurisdictions I've just mentioned, where the highest tax rate is close to 45 to 50%. And more significantly, the level that the rate applies, the highest tax rate applies, is a lot lower than the 320 here in Singapore. Now, if you are a non-resident of Singapore, you are still taxable on your Singapore sourced income. And it's done at a flat rate of 15%, either 15% or your progressive, or the progressive tax rate, which would apply if you were a tax resident. So if you earned a significant amount of income sourced in Singapore, such that you would get up to that 22% tax bracket, then it is highly likely that you would be in a position where the effective tax rate would be higher than 15%. And if that was the case, then that higher effective rate would apply. But if you're going to be lower than, if your effective tax rate using the progressive scale is less than 15%, then the threshold of 15% is applied to you as a non-resident. So going on to what are elements of income in the tax returns? Yeah, generally for most individuals in Singapore, you will be taxed on your employment income. Okay, so at the end of each year, your employer will prepare a statement of your income for the year. This will be a combination of your base salary, any bonuses you've received during the year, any allowances you're paid during the year, and any benefits in kind, which I'll come back to in a minute. So that's all there in a summary. And another one is any employee share schemes that you may be entitlements that are vested during the year that you earn as part of your remuneration package as an employee. So that summary, generally for a lot of businesses in Singapore, is sent automatically to IRAS, the tax authorities. And they will then pre-populate your tax return to have those numbers. So as part of your tax lodgement process, it's really important for you to consider and make sure that those numbers that are being pre-populated do tally up and reconcile to what you've actually received. Now, benefits in kind are payments made by your employer for things such as your accommodation, schooling, purchase of a vehicle. So these things that are private in nature, so not business related. In other jurisdictions such as Australia, we commonly know them as fringe benefits. So in Singapore, those types of benefits are regarded as non-cash remuneration packages. So the portion of your remuneration which is not paid to you in cash, but paid on your behalf to a third-party provider. So a common one is medical insurance and school fees, okay? So if you're on an employment package where your employer will provide comprehensive medical insurance for the family, and the policy is paid on top of your income and directly by your employer to the underwriter, that will be regarded as a benefit in kind. So that is then added to your ordinary income and becomes taxable at the applicable scaling rate. Now, another matter that I should cover here, or would like to cover here, is in relation to the taxation of shares and employee share options in particular. Often it's common for expatriates to arrive in Singapore as part of a relocation by their employer. And as they've worked in another jurisdiction, they've then received share entitlements with vest over time. Now, as I said in the introduction, Singapore is only interested in income sourced in Singapore. So therefore, those share entitlements which may vest when you're in Singapore, but you were granted when you were in your last place of jurisdiction, it will not be taxable in Singapore because it's not sourced here. So that's a very important distinction for you to know. Now, because of the tax rates being relatively low, there are a limited amount of deductions which you can claim. And it's very important that you have receipts and logbooks for the claims. But things such as if you use your motor vehicle for work purposes, which is quite common in a lot of jurisdictions around the world, that is specifically not a deduction that you can claim in your personal tax return. Things such, so things that you can claim for work-related purposes are things like, association membership fees, subscription to industry journals, where you haven't been given a reimbursement, you can claim those. Home office expenses as well is another common one in the current world. And another key donation that a lot of people forget about is a key deduction, is the donations that you make to registered charities in Singapore. They're deductible at 2.5 times of the amount you donated. So if you donate $100 to a registered charity in Singapore, you can then claim 250 in your tax return. And that obviously reduces your taxable income. So one of the biggest or largest areas of concession, which you'll see on the next slide, is that of rebates and tax reliefs. So the way that Singapore calculates your individual tax return is that you have your income, which is declared on your annual statement. You will deduct any expenses that we've talked about in the previous slide, and that will provide you taxable income. You will be then taxed at the relative marginal rate of tax, and then and that will give you your tax payable. Now, that won't be your final tax payable, because you are entitled to a number of what we call tax reliefs. And these are actually reductions in your tax liability. So if you have children, a non-working spouse, and a domestic helper, these are some of the reliefs that you can claim to reduce your tax liability and reduce the amount of, reduce your tax liability. Now, once you've applied those reliefs, you are then able to pay, your tax in two ways. You can either make a lump sum payment, which a lot of people are quite used to, or in Singapore, you're able to pay your tax liability in installments over approximately 10 to 12 months. Now, these installments are not subject to interest, so it's not a loan arrangement. It is just a pro rata payment, which is done via gyro or direct debit from your savings account. And that needs to be set up, and it's set up once. And once you set it up, unless you cancel it, it will just continue onwards. So as I said, the Singapore tax system is relatively simple compared to a lot of other jurisdictions, but there are some opportunities and reliefs that you should look into when you prepare your tax return.
Okay, thank you, Boone. It was a good coverage on tax, and I think clearly a lot more of a deep dive needs to happen before someone arrives. I think it's now time we should turn to Q&A, and we have had quite a few questions come in, and so I will choose from which of the speakers we'll throw the question to. First question I've got in, it's for Bronwyn. Perhaps can you describe a little bit about how a virtual school visit works?
Yes, so basically a virtual visit is just scheduled in advance with the specific school. Then it's administered through like a similar platform to what we're using now, such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Some of the schools have set up videos which actually take you for a virtual walk around the campus, so it can give you an idea of the actual campus layout. And the balance of the virtual visit would just be a meeting with the admissions staff member. An alternative would also be that the schools are offering virtual open days where the school leadership would actually conduct those. So that would give you an opportunity of meeting like the school principals or teachers. So that maybe gives you a little bit further insights. But basically it's an online meeting with the school staff.
And another question I think works for you. How do I know what school culture is best for my child, and how easy is it for me to move my child from school to school when I'm there?
Yeah, so actually a large part of the service that we offer is working with families to try and understand what your requirements are and which schools in Singapore will best suit those requirements. So we offer a consulting service. So you would book a consult, we could go through all of that with you and help identify a short list of 2 or 3 schools, which would best meet your family's requirements. And then the second part of the question was, sorry, John?
Was moving. So if I want to move my child.
Yeah, that is actually quite difficult in Singapore. So a lot of schools have quite substantial upfront fees when you join. So they can be up to about $10,000 at some schools. So if you do move schools, then you would forfeit those sign-up costs, and then obviously you have to pay it at the new school. So it's worth your while doing comprehensive investigation into which school you feel will be best suited for your child prior to actually joining.
Okay, thank you. Question here is for school enrollments. Some schools in Singapore are oversubscribed and have waiting lists. Can we register first at another school before transferring when a slot opens up?
So yes, that is possible. So there are a number of schools in Singapore that have got extensive wait lists. So if you decide that one of those schools is the school that you would like to move ahead with, and you aren't able to gain admission right away, then there are schools with availability. So you would be able to find schooling if you were moving to Singapore, and then later on decide if you would like to transfer to another school if you wish. But again, you would incur those joining costs. You'd have to pay those twice.
PJ, this question I think is probably best directed to you. The schools you mentioned, how do I know how they compare to schools in my home country? And how can I get more information? So PJ, I think there was a few names you had on the list there.
Yeah.
I guess someone wants to know how do they compare back to the hometown?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. And it's similar to what Bronwyn mentioned there. What's important for a school can vary depending on the family in relation to their priorities. And yes, there's standard measures that you might look at in relation to academic results or sense of belonging or sporting activities or drama or music or CCAs or facilities. That really does vary depending on the individual. So if you are coming from a school that you absolutely adore in your home country, I think the first step would just be to map out what are the aspects of that school that you do adore, and prioritize that and be very clear on that. And then when you're looking at the schools that you're going to, you've got a very clear assessment criteria in which you can compare. And the schools, as we've mentioned, and Bronwyn mentioned that in relation to virtual visits and tours. It is a very competitive environment in Singapore. And because of the natural attrition that you see in Singapore naturally of expatriates being here and leaving, the schools are generally very good at managing that customer journey. So if you're very clear on what you value, you're very clear in the questions that you ask, and you're very clear in what you're comparing your current school against with the school that you're looking for, you should be able to gather enough insights from that to make the correct decision for yourself. What you can also definitely do is there's a number of different expat forum chats and sites that have a lot of information. So you can get information from the school, which would be an admissions process. You can garner information online on the various expat forums, which is word of mouth, which is obviously very authentic. So you can do your own homework, as well as on that, you can engage, someone like Bronwyn, who obviously has an understanding of all the schools, having been here for a number of years, that can support you in that. But the first step definitely is to understand the absolute criteria that you value, so that you can obviously go in and assess it against a similar comparable approach.
Thank you. Boone, one's come in, which I think it's definitely for you. I have 2 employment contracts, one from a French company, which I'm getting paid in France, and I'm looking at coming to Singapore and working also with a Singaporean company. So do I only pay tax on Singapore and not my French contract? So obviously, my friend, I think that's for you.
Yeah, very good question, John. So remembering that there's 2 elements here to think of, to consider. The first is the source of where the work is done. If you're in Singapore full-time, then very evidently you're providing the service or fulfilling your obligations under the French employment contract whilst you're in Singapore. And therefore that means that its source is here in Singapore, and Singapore would be wanting to tax any income you earned under that French contract, regardless of the fact that it wasn't even paid into a Singapore bank account. Now, the key thing here is to ensure that obviously you're not double taxed. And that's where the double tax agreements between Singapore and France needs to be carefully considered, and engagement with a French tax advisor strongly recommended, because what it is highly likely that we'll need to get the French advisor to engage the French tax authorities to ensure that they're not, the French authorities understand that you're not in France generating that income. And if there's any concessions under the double tax agreements, that it is properly administered and applied to your particular circumstance.
Okay, sounds like a bunch of work to get there. Another one is if I set up, I have a business overseas and I set up a business in Singapore. Do I pay tax on my overseas business income when I'm in Singapore?
From a corporate tax perspective, tax residencies for companies is defined in Singapore as where central management and control is. So if you are the director of a overseas company and you are running that company from Singapore and earning income, that company in the overseas jurisdiction should and is going to be regarded as a Singapore tax resident. Therefore, taxation will be applied here in Singapore because the source of that income is here, because that's where potentially all the agreements and contracts are being executed. So again, just as discussed in the previous example or situation with the French dual contract arrangement, a double tax agreement between Singapore and the jurisdiction of that company would need to be considered to see what can be done to alleviate any potential double taxation, and whether there's any, if there is double taxation, is there any opportunity for the company to claim a foreign tax credit? So claiming a credit for the tax paid in the foreign jurisdiction against the tax liability in Singapore for the company.
Got it. Thank you. Another one has come here, which again I think it's got more of a tax flavor. What about taxation on cryptocurrencies? If I have a portfolio held in Binance, for instance, and I decide to withdraw cryptos and move them into Singapore on a bank account in Singapore, will my income be taxed?
Yeah, so cryptocurrencies is a very interesting and a very topical question. The key issue to look at is where the location of the wallet is. Now, someone like Binance, a large exchange like Binance, Coinbase, Gemini even, it will be a little bit difficult to ascertain where your wallet sit. What is it? A wallet in Singapore? Is it a wallet in another outside of Singapore? So it's a little bit different to a bank account where you can readily say, look, my account is with the branch in New York. My account is with the branch in Sydney. A crypto wallet is a little bit different and more difficult. Now, the onus will be on you as the taxpayer to show that crypto wallet is not in Singapore, because prima facie, the Inland Revenue IRAS will basically assume that it is in Singapore. So it would be important to understand and get some clarity on which branch perhaps of Binance you're signed up with, and getting a bit of color from Binance themselves as to where they maintain their wallets. Because if it is a foreign wallet, then potentially there is no gain or tax to be considered.
Thank you. This one looks like it's for Ronald. Does Singapore recognize de facto relationships if I want to move into Singapore with my girlfriend? So Ronald, I don't know the answer to that one.
The answer is no.
Okay, well that's pretty good. Okay, so so they recognize a legal relationship, and then that person can move in. Question asked and answered. Charlie, someone would like to know what you mentioned, a survey. What's involved with a video survey, please? How do they engage you, I guess, and how do they do a video survey? What's involved there?
Okay, well, basically, John, we would normally go ahead and do this through like WhatsApp, and it's the easiest, and like very straightforward and very good these days. We just go ahead and set an appointment time, and then we go ahead and do the video. They would go ahead and show us around the apartment, and then just stop, and then we would go ahead and take screenshots of the items that they would like to go ahead and send. And we would look at that, and then from there we would go ahead and be able to prepare a quotation based on the video that we have. So, and then we've also got the record of the video, so and all the pictures and all the screenshots of each of the items. So it's a good record of what they showed us. We supply the quotation.
So I guess you estimate volume, and then I guess if they don't end up going with you, I suppose you just throw the photos out or do something along those lines.
Exactly. And it's, as I said, it's a good record, for us, and it's a good record for the shipper. So it's fairly straightforward. It's actually very accurate these days.
How can Sir Moving help me find someone? Okay, so I think this is more if someone wants to move. Do they use a mover where they're moving from, or do they call you and then you move them from where they are? How does that work?
Yeah, well, we're doing quite a few moves from Hong Kong, to Australia and to Singapore. And effectively, we would go through our partner if they need a site survey. If they did a video survey, then we would go ahead, prepare the quotation, and then we would go ahead and handle it door to door, to Singapore or to like another country. So they could just deal with to handle the move.
Okay, a more general one now, which I'll probably get Boone to come back in on. How can Expatland help my family coming to Singapore?
Well, with the team of professionals in our E-team in Singapore, which you've met a number of here, and in addition to the people you've met here today, We also have a lawyer, a car leasing provider, a real estate agent who specializes in helping expats arrive. How we can help is guiding you through that journey and introducing you to our team members one by one as and when you need it along your journey to enter into Singapore. So obviously a first port of call is certainly going to be Ronald and Echelon Global Services to get your visa right. The second, after that, we should then talk to Charlie about, getting in a ballpark on cost and timeline for movement, and also Seth from Zenith, and getting Seth and his team at Zenith Real Estate to then guide you through your options with regards to where to stay. I know, and in all of these cases and in all these team members, we're all focused on and have experience in helping expatriates arrive and go through that process before they're actually here, and give ideas. For example, Seth would be able to give you some ideas in what areas of Singapore you should think about, and you can then do some searches online through web channels. So that, John, that's really those three are really the starting point. And as time moves along, you'll eventually go through the team.
Got it. Thank you. One more, Ronald, for you. It is, what about the inconvenience of a mother of a student pass holder only getting a short-term visitor pass and then having to keep extending that every month? So I don't know if there's an easy answer to that question, Ronald. The last answer was no. I'm not sure about this one. So what does the mother do here?
For the mother, she can actually apply for the guardian pass. She can actually be here to take care of the kid. So she can actually apply for guardian pass.
Right.
So that's subject to the approval, and also you have to actually look into the complexity of the relationship, and also if it's a mother, then we can actually apply for guardian pass. But if it's stepmother or any other relationship, we'll have to actually look into its case-to-case basis.
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, I just guess then that if the child is, say, entering secondary school, obviously it could be here quite a while. How long does the guardian pass run? Or is it the length of the school's education, or how does that, is there a term limit on it? Or
the guardian pass is actually tied to the student pass.
Right. Okay.
So if it's a full-time student, then the pass, so long as the pass is it's not expired, the guardian pass will just follow suit.
That's good. One more question for you, Charlie. Do all moving companies also provide packing services? So I think someone wants you to do some hard work, Charlie.
Yeah, generally it's like every moving company will go ahead and do the packing. I mean, that's basically what we do. We do the packing, we do the shipping, and we do the unwrap, unpack, and at the destination here. Yeah, some customers go ahead and do their own packing, which is fine, but then they would have insurance issues, because then they couldn't claim for an all risks policy, for instance. They can only claim for maybe a total loss if it's only a few boxes. But generally, the most of our customers would request packing and shipping.
Got it. So can you just expand on that insurance point you made there? That may be lost on some people.
Yeah, well, generally, the insurance moving is a bit probably like renting a car, because, when you rent the car, they ask you if you would like the insurance just in case something happens. Moving is virtually the same. We go ahead and we'll do the shipping door to door, and then we offer the insurance if they would like to go ahead and take the insurance. You have an all risks policy, which covers you for any breakage, damage, loss, electrical, mechanical derangement, that type of thing. Or we could offer a total loss. The premium is different. But again, most customers will go for the insurance because you just, you never know what's going to happen.
Thank you. And this is a question more generally. Would you advise a platform or website where we can apply for jobs in Singapore? I often see some jobs in LinkedIn, but not quite sure if foreigners are allowed. So Ronald, I guess you might have a go at this. Jobs being advertised internationally, presumably foreigners can apply?
LinkedIn is usually the best platform for foreigners before they come into Singapore. So they can even apply for JobStreet. Because by JobStreet, they will actually specifically mention if it's only applicable for the locals or it's even open for it's open for foreigners. So it depends on the criteria or the requirements in JobStreet, etc. It's like LinkedIn as well. It's like there are openings in LinkedIn for foreigners. Or they can even look for headhunters. Headhunters would be a good avenue for them to look for jobs in Singapore.
Thank you. And then I guess one more question here is back to Boone. Do I pay tax on a bonus I earned overseas, which is sent to Singapore?
No, you don't, because that bonus which you've earned overseas isn't sourced in Singapore, so therefore it won't be subject to tax in Singapore.
Okay, and we've got one more here. Someone wants to know if they can deduct their home office expenses from their income tax.
They certainly can, but they do need to, it is very important to maintain some records and be able to demonstrate the basis to which you are claiming your deductions and how you can show that it is work-related and not private usage.
Would they do that based on floor space, or how do you figure that out?
It's a combination. Yep, floor space is one. Obviously, if you have a dedicated home office, you can certainly use floor space for usage such as internet connectivity. You can log number of hours that you're online, and then take a percentage of the monthly invoice bill for that.
Okay. And then I think you've answered this before, but I'll just check it out. As a digital nomad, if I am working in Singapore for a US-based company and I'm a US citizen, do I pay tax in Singapore? So I think I know what you're going to say there.
Yeah, you will. You will pay tax in Singapore because that income is going to be sourced in Singapore.
Okay. All right. And one question's come back. I don't know if this is PJ or Bronwyn. Does it make a difference if I buy a house close to the school? Will it be easier for me to get into the school?
So no, not at all. So basically you can, so Singapore is not like going to school in most other countries. You can pick whichever school you want. There's no zoning or anything like that. So you can choose a school wherever you want to stay. And there is the schools don't give a priority to families that live closer to them.
John, the only point I'd add to that, which is to Bronwyn's, is obviously important to think about where you are going to live and where the school is and whether you're going to have a car or not. We certainly have experienced families who, for example, might choose the school and then choose to live at Sentosa and then realise that it's a little bit of a commute every day to and from the school. So it certainly is beneficial to think about both of those hand in hand. So
PJ, I guess then what you're letting people know is that Cognita doesn't have a school on Sentosa, mate.
I'm in deep discussions. I've been working on it for a while. So it's not in the pipeline just yet.
All right. Well, so I think there's one more. I'm not really sure. Can you reimburse for certification renewals? That's probably a tax question, Boone. Can you get a deduction for renewals of your certifications, which I imagine you'll have an answer for?
You can, if it is directly related to your employment, you can certainly get a reimbursement or claim it as a deduction in your personal tax return.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think we, in the interests of getting to the fireside chat, which I'm really looking forward to hearing from our guests, I'll wrap up the questions there. We will obviously share the email addresses. We'll work out how to share the email addresses of the panelists. And for anyone who's got questions they want to put to Boone or Charlie or Ronald or Bronwyn or PJ directly, by all means, we'll work out how to get those email addresses to you. I think it's now a great pleasure of mine to introduce Alberini Sim, Regional Vice President of Singapore Global Network, who will speak with members of the Singapore Global Network now on our fireside chat. So thank you, Alberini. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon and welcome to the second segment of the Moving to Singapore Forum. I'm Alberini from the Singapore Global Network, or SGN for short. We are a division under the Singapore Economic Development Board. We work closely with thought leaders, community builders, and advocates of Singapore in promoting opportunities here, as well as in connecting Singaporeans and friends of Singapore to each other. I hope you have benefited from the panel of industry experts sharing and the Q&A session on the various topics related to relocation. Now, for this segment of the forum, we have gathered two panelists who are members from the Singapore Global Network to share their relocation journey and experiences and how their stay in Singapore has been so far. We would also like to hear your questions for the speakers, or the panelists rather. Please submit them via the Q&A session located at the bottom of your screen and vote for the question you would like for the panelists to answer. And we will try our best to address as many as the top voted questions during the Q&A. So I'm really excited to introduce the two panelists, Charles Allen and Maria Pia Batillo, who have recently relocated to Singapore and with their family respectively. Charles and Maria Pia, would you like to say hello and briefly introduce yourselves to our audiences, perhaps starting with Charles?
Sure, thank you, Alberini, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charles Allen. I moved to Singapore from Hong Kong last year in August. I moved with my wife and 4 children, aged between 8 and 16. Our helper in Hong Kong, Ruby, also chose to move with us. She stayed another couple of months in Hong Kong and then followed us to Singapore. And we also moved with our pet dog, our Whippet, Penny. So it was a broad move of us all from Hong Kong to Singapore last year. In Singapore, I started a new role. I'm now a digital operations advisor for a company called TPG, which is a private equity business that has a fund here based in Singapore and invests in companies in the region. And I provide advice on digital and technology to those companies. I'm delighted to be here speaking with you today.
Thank you. Maria Pia?
Hello, hi everybody. Hi Alberini, thank you very much for inviting me. So my name is Maria Pia and I come from Rome, Italy. I'm here because of my husband's job. He's an engineer, oil and gas engineer, and he's here for a project that was supposed to be for 1 year more or less. So then it became 2 years in Singapore. So for our family, I've 3 kids aged between 8 and 15. We were very excited to be here, and we arrived in July 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic, it was not that easy at the beginning. We had to do the stay home notice, of course, and then everything. But we were kind of used because we were coming from the second country in the world where the COVID spread it. So, you know, we were quite used to this lockdown, let's say. Actually, life in Singapore became a little bit easier for us than in Italy. So it's a pleasure for me to tell my beautiful experience in Singapore.
Thank you. So maybe we could probably start the discussion or hearing, your experiences, I guess, maybe starting from the relocation part of things. Maybe with Charles, you mentioned that you moved with a very big family, including your pets. And of course, pets are a very important part of the family. And of course, the helper as well, which is, a valuable part of the family as well. So moving with a big family, right, together with the helper and the pets, which also sometimes entail a whole different set of administration paperwork with it. So, I mean, what were some of the administrative processes or paperwork that you have to complete as part of the move for this entire family?
Yeah, so I had to make some notes on this, Alberini, just to make sure I cover the different pieces. So before we left Hong Kong, there were a few things we piece of paperwork we went through, and we did it all ourselves. So the first was the visa process for me to work in Singapore. I went through there's a visa called Tech Pass, which is what I applied for, and that process took, I think on the website it says it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and it took pretty much exactly 6 to 8 weeks. So I went through that process for the visa for me, and then the dependent visa applications for my wife and children. I also wanted to have a company set up in Singapore so that I was able to, I was unsure exactly what role I would be doing when I got here, and was thinking about different options, but thought I would want to have a company set up before arriving. So with the help of a local accountant, I got my company set up while based in Hong Kong. So that was already moving. I actually had a personal bank account set up as well in Singapore, again, before arriving. And then for us, again, we were moving like Maria Peer during all of this, the lockdown. So we actually ended up finding our accommodation here in Singapore while sitting in Hong Kong, and we agreed the tenancy agreement and went through the leasehold, and so agreed that actually all before arriving. So quite a few things that we sorted out before leaving. And then on arrival, there was the process of actually getting the visa issued by the Ministry of Manpower, which was as simple as taking a booking and visiting the offices, and then setting up utilities and the like. And then probably the only piece that took longer than I thought it would was getting a company bank account set up. So that actually took a few weeks after arriving. So the visa and the utilities and all of that was pretty quick. And then getting the account set up for my company was probably another couple of months after arriving. And then turning to our helper. So again, my wife did most of the work around this one, but we've just followed the details on the website. She filled out a form. I think there was a training that she went through to ensure that she understood the expectations on us for employing a helper. And there was some setup in terms of a monthly fee payment that we filled out a form to do that. But no big issues with that. And then finally, for our dog Penny, there was some vaccination checks we had to do, I think, making sure she was up to date on various vaccinations, and again, various forms around that, but fairly easy. And there was no, she actually flew on the same plane as us, and arrived at home the same day that we arrived. So there was no period of her being quarantined from us. So overall, our experience was, it was a very easy process to follow. We did it all directly and just using information on the websites that we were able to work through. So it was overall a pretty positive experience for us.
Great, thank you. I mean, I think it's really nice to hear that, throughout this whole process, I guess just that anxiety or just waiting for things to fall into place. I'm quite happy to hear that kind of the whole family moved with no, I guess, separation anxiety or, probably waiting for certain paperwork to be done, that the whole family was able to relocate to Singapore together, of course, with Penny as well. Maybe just moving on to Maria Pia. I mean, what about you? In our earlier conversation, you mentioned that I think you and your spouse and your children as well have been living or working with a few countries before relocating to Singapore, which is your latest stop. So how has the move been for you, to Singapore, as well as, especially during the pandemic, right? What were some of the challenges or what has kind of worked well for you as well when you moved in to Singapore in 2020?
Okay, for us, it was our first time in Asia, not as tourists, I mean. First time as expat. We used to live in Colombia, so in South America, which is normally people think it's a very dangerous country. It can be, of course, but for us it was not anyway. Then we went to Holland as well for a while, and it was, of course, very easy, you know, because it's in a European country, and for a European, everything is very, very easy, very, very close. So we could even go to our family to visit, and then friends could visit us like every weekend. So it was very easy as well. Of course, Asia could be a little bit more challenging, especially during the pandemic. So we already knew that more or less no one could come to visit us. And then we didn't know for how long we wouldn't have seen our family as well, because of course we came during the pandemic. So it could have been very challenging, but at the same time, it was very happy for us. I mean, we moved with a group of colleagues of my husband with all families. So we already had our little community already, which is not what a person needs. I mean, in Singapore, it's very easy to make new friends, to meet new people from all over the world. So people are very open-minded because there are many expats, and also we had also very good experiences also with Singaporean people, really. So everything was very smooth. I mean, yeah, we came with our friends, and they became our family for sure, because we, for example, spent our first Christmas abroad. Normally, Italian people go back to the family during Christmas time, but the first year it was not possible. Last year it wasn't possible. So we spent our Christmas together, and that's why it was our family over here. And then we chose the school where the Italian was a mother tongue language taught at school. So it was not an extra activity, because most of us needed this Italian course for the children, especially who had, like me, for example, I have two children in the elementary school. So it was very important for us that they learned also Italian.
Right.
For my first daughter, of course, it was normal because she's 15. So for her, it was already her language. But
Right.
we wanted to, really.
Right. So maybe we will talk about a little bit more about education later. But what I wanted to also find out as well, I think more on Charles, you mentioned that you kind of secured your permanent accommodation or your apartment here in Singapore while you're in Hong Kong, right? I mean, I don't know. For me, when I was living in overseas, I would really want to be able to like be at the apartment, have a bit of a touch and feel, you know, where the restrooms are, how big is the space in the bathroom, kitchen, so on and so forth. But I guess how is it like? I mean, looking for an apartment virtually, right? And even, you know, perhaps looking for an agent to be able to help you to do that. Yeah, I think this question is actually for Charles and Maria. Maybe I'll go with you, Charles, first to share that.
Yeah, sure. So of all of the parts, that was probably the most stressful, Alberini, because it's you're right. There's one thing which is looking on Google Maps and having some photographs and maybe a video, and then the other thing is you walk through the door and you think, is this what I'm expecting? So that was probably the most, the source of most stress around it. I mean, the way it worked for us is we actually did it directly rather than using an agent. We managed to find the area we were interested in, and it was linked to the school, and then find the property, and we're able actually to speak with the people who are currently in the property, and they gave us a good sense of the place and what it was like. But it was definitely the most definitely the piece which gave us the most stress was when we walked through the door, what would it be like? And it's not just the place itself, it's also actually the environment around it, and what's the road like, and is it noisy or not noisy? And so that was, I mean, it worked out okay. Well, no, that's unfair. It worked out very well. But it was the area that was probably the most uncertain about the whole move.
Right. And I assume you're still in the same apartment, yes?
We're still in the same place, exactly.
Okay, good. So it was right on point. What about you, Maria Pia? I mean, you mentioned as well, I think you made actually like a visit, right? Before deciding to come here, right? To kind of check out the place. Maybe share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we spent only 1 week in Singapore just to, familiarize a little bit with the city, but it was really very, very quick. but it was only, you know, for visiting the schools, to see more or less the area we could choose, especially because my husband works completely at the opposite of the school. So we had to choose an area a little bit central, let's say. So, so yes, we came over here, we spent few days, but unfortunately it was not possible to see any apartment, because in Singapore, as soon as you choose an apartment, you have to confirm it. So it was not our case. It was January when we came, we spent the New Year's Eve in Singapore, and then we had to go back to Italy. So it was a period of like 7 months before taking the apartment. So when we arrived the second time, so we stayed in a service apartment like many people do, I heard. And then we spent like 3 weeks, almost 1 month. And in the meantime, we used to look for an apartment. We had an agent because the company where my husband works, they suggested us an agent. So she took the appointments with the landlords, and so that it was a little bit easier to understand more or less, because in one day we could even visit like 10 or something more apartments. So it was a very tough research, but at the end everything was very easy. It was quite easy to understand which was the best area, like also Charles said. So I think this is the main part of the relocation, maybe.
I see. Well, great. I hope you are, enjoying your neighborhood and enjoying the vicinity where you're staying in, and really enjoying Singapore right now. Maybe I want to just move the next area of discussion to education, because education is definitely a very important consideration by the parents, in terms of, number one, to the location that they will be, the next move that they want to move their kids to, right? I guess the education system in that country in the host country is going to be very important. And I wanted to just find out on that, like, before moving to Singapore or even looking for the right school for your children, as part of your thought processes, what were some of the considerations that you had in mind in looking for the right school? And the second question was, in response to that, then what were some of the sources of information or help that you have in your research for the right school for your children? Either of you may start.
Let me go first on that one. I mean, our decision process was actually fairly easy, really. So my wife is French. My kids have always gone to the French school wherever. So when we were back in the UK, they're at the French school. They went to the French school in Hong Kong, and so we're very happy with that system. So for us, it was very much. The default was to find out if there was a French school in Singapore. I think we knew there was one, and then whether there was space for the kids in that. And so we got in touch with the school when we were getting pretty sure we were going to move, and they this was probably in April time last year, May time, and they did have space available, so again through that we didn't look further, really. So once we found out about that was the option we went with, and didn't actually consider other schools. What was actually very positive about the school here is that it's on one campus. So we were used to actually the kids in their different ages having different campuses, and actually it turns out the French school here in Singapore is actually on one large campus, which was a nice bonus for us.
And what about you?
So for us, the experience was a little bit different because my kids didn't speak any English, so only Italian. So for us, it was important to find a situation for them quite comfortable. So we found I can say the name of the school. Okay, the Overseas Family School, because and we at the beginning we visited, as I said before, a few schools, like 3 or 4, just to understand, if there was something more or something less. But more or less, they are very similar in the international curriculum. But for us, it was very important to have the a program especially for kids who didn't speak any English. So in our case, the Overseas Family School was quite good, was very good actually, because they form classes with kids who don't speak any English, so they can start from the very beginning. And at one point, so they do the same program as the normal grade, but in a softer way. So for them, it's a little bit more comfortable, let's say. So especially for those who are in the primary school, because my teenager daughter, she used to speak already English, so she was admitted directly in a mainstream class, and for her it was very comfortable as well. But you know, for the other two, and then for all these other kids which were with us, so all the parents, we were a little bit scared, you know, to face with this completely new situation, new language, new everything. And so we decided for this school, because of this SPP program, which is a study preparation program, and which means that they are put in a class, in a smaller class. They are like 8 to 10 kids, and they can start from the beginning. And then at the end of a term, or whenever the teacher considers them ready, they can go to a mainstream, so they feel more comfortable at that point. And then on the other hand, again, I wanted for them also an Italian teacher, an Italian English course. And in that case, we found it, because there are like, I think 14 mother tongue classes in the Overseas Family School. And so one of them was Italian. So I was put from the school, I was put in touch with the Italian teacher before coming to Singapore. So she explained me everything. And then at the end, it was very easy for us to decide, even though the location was not that comfortable for us, that convenient, because the school is in Pasir Ris, which is on the east coast, close to Changi. And then my husband, again, he works in Tuas, which is in the west. So we had to decide for our location, our apartment, to be in the center. So we decided Newton, Novena, Orchard, more or less, this is the area.
I see. Maria Pia, I hope your husband isn't doing the school runs before going to work.
No, actually he works very early in the morning. He never went to school until now, more or less.
Okay, if not, it would
bus.
have been a good tour as he drives your kids to school and then to his workplace.
It wouldn't be that easy for him, because he goes to work at 6:50 in the morning. So it's very hard.
I see.
Yeah,
Then
but
maybe
school buses, so it's very good.
Okay, school bus is always a good option. So in terms of, say, literally, I guess, after you've decided on the school that you want to place your children in, how was the application process like? I mean, was there a wait list, or, there were vacancies available? So how was the process like, in terms of, say, from the time of application to being notified of the successful placement of your children? And were there any, I guess, was the paperwork or the administrative process smooth as well?
I have to say the OFS is a very, very easy school, free school, let's say, because they accept kids during all the school year, sorry. So, and then there is no issue about the place. I mean, they always accept kids. So they didn't have any issue about the numbers. And I see also now there are kids coming in my kids' class also now, which is April, almost the end of the year. Last year it was the same. So they're very flexible, let's say, I think. So we didn't have any issue. We could have some issue in case there are many schools which require a certain level of English. So in our case, we were already out. And then, of course, if they have a waiting list, of course, for us, it would have been much harder. But since we decided for this school, it was very smooth as well.
What about you, Charles?
It was very similar. It was, we got in touch with the school. There was a process we went through. There was I think there was a deposit we paid, but there was no waiting list. now I don't know what the situation is. So that was in May, June last year that we were applying, and for the kids to start at school in September last year. I think what I hear is there are a lot of people looking to place their children at schools in Singapore. So I don't know if there is still availability, but certainly when we went through, it was a fairly easy process of application form for each of the kids, a deposit paid, and then that was all we needed to do to confirm the place.
Great. So maybe before we move on to the Q&A, maybe just one last question to find out. That's something I'm quite interested to hear about. So, both of you have been here in Singapore for slightly over a year. So how has life been in Singapore for you and your family? I mean, what are some of the things that you and your family enjoy, about living in Singapore, even on weekends? It's always nice to hear, from just, people or friends of Singapore who have just relocated to Singapore. So yeah, tell me about it.
Repair, you go first.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Charles. Life in Singapore is very good for us. I mean, we were coming for a very bad period, I repeat, again. So the pandemic in Europe, but especially in Italy, made us really sad, let's say, not only sad, but also everything was quite hard. So we arrived over here, we immediately understood that there were many rules, many more than in Italy. But, on the other hand, it's very good to have these rules, because this allowed us to send the kids to the school for sure, first. While in Italy, people couldn't go to school, or we could even go out. Okay, there were a group of people, there were restrictions about the numbers. But on the other hand, we could go out. While in Italy, again, it was not possible sometimes. And then, of course, unfortunately, we couldn't travel. This was, but for us already Singapore was new. So for us, it was always discovering a new city, new lifestyle, new everything. So restaurants, also we did this staycation, which was very, very common to do last year. And then everything was very new. And then for us, spending time at the beach in Sentosa, also it was very nice, because it was like January, February, and in Italy, of course, is winter. So the weather was something really amazing for us, to have a summer 1 year long. So I think, yes, we cannot complain about anything. In Singapore, lifestyle is so easy for us, and then everything works very well. As a European, as unfortunately, and as Italian, I have to say that something is not working so well in Italy. So, and then especially Rome, which is unfortunately a beautiful city, but it's not really working well for everything. So everything was really, really easy for us, exciting. This nightlife, let's say nightlife up to 10:30, but it was still it was still okay. I mean, we could discover so many new things. So it was not an issue for us not to travel. And then we just now went to Thailand, so it was already something. So
Sounds good. What about you, Charles? What have you been doing or up to with your family during your free time and weekend?
I really feel like we're still getting started with discovering Singapore. So I think we're just doing the sort of the activities for the first time. So just last weekend we did our very first night safari at the zoo, which was actually amazing. I have some great photographs. And then we're just, we had our first picnic in the botanical gardens a couple of weeks ago, and our first walk on East Coast. So yeah, we're very, I feel like we're really in the early stages of exploring Singapore, and it's great now that things are opening up. So I look forward to go out and meals out and restaurants, and that's going to be just great. So yeah, I feel like we're very early in our Singapore experience, and we're all enjoying it so far.
Sounds good. Great. So maybe we could just move on to the Q&A, and I picked a couple of questions to check, or to pose to both of you. Is that I think in terms of accommodation, in terms of rent, did you negotiate on the rent, right? How is it like, how was the negotiation process like for you when it comes to money matters, I guess?
So for us on the rent, so we did the negotiation from Hong Kong. We were using the different websites, Property Guru and others to understand the prices of different properties in the area we're interested in. And I'm just trying to remember back exactly. There were a few. There were a couple of clauses in the contract that we wanted to make sure were in there, so that we had some negotiation around that. We didn't. We agreed a price remotely. I don't think we had a lot of back and forth on it. I think we were pretty comfortable with the price that was there, and it was more, there's a couple of line items in the tenancy agreement that we wanted to tweak. So I don't remember it being it wasn't a difficult conversation, but we were from a financial perspective, I think we were okay with the initial amount. So we didn't negotiate it down through that discussion.
How about you, Maria Pia?
I think we could negotiate a little bit because at the beginning, when we arrived, it was again July 2020, so in the middle of pandemic. So I think many families left for good Singapore, and so a lot of apartments were empty at that point, and so we could negotiate a little bit on the price. And then actually we didn't have any issue then, because at the beginning we had to do a contract of only 1 year. It was not that easy. In general, it's not really easy. They normally do at least 2 years contract for the apartments. But then it was okay also for the landlord to accept it, because maybe it was not the best period for the landlords. And then it was not a problem to renew it again when we need it at the same price as well. So we were lucky, maybe, I don't know, but it was okay. And then I already know that since we are going back, unfortunately, in July, we're leaving Singapore because our 2 years project is going to be finished. So I know for sure that the price is going to rise a little bit.
Right. Okay. So I guess maybe I'll probably have one last question for both of you as well. Both of you have moved have moved from places to places. So probably how has the adjustment period or adjustment process been like for, your family, especially your children, from basically adjusting from, one country's culture to another, to layer on that, right? The school, right? Moving from one school to another, where also is about making a new batch of friends as well, right? So how has the adjustment adjustment process been like for both your children or even for the entire family as they enrolled into a new school?
For my kids, I was a little bit scared for my teenager. She's 15, she's a girl, so I didn't know really the reaction. It was for her at that age the first time that she had to move, because when we went to Colombia and to Holland, she was only 3-4 years old. So, and then after almost 10 years, we had this chance again to move. So it was a little bit probably tough for her, the idea. But then when we arrived in Singapore, everything was, very, very easy, because she was very welcome by the classmates, the teacher, the school. The school has this habit, I think most of the international schools, so they have buddies for the new students, so they're like friends, the first friends that they have, so they can understand the building, and then where are the classes, where is the gym, where is the canteen and everything, because all these buildings are huge, these campuses are huge. As Charles, I also have the 3 kids in the same campus, which was one of my hope. And for the other 2 as well, they are 8 and 9. It was easy as well, because of this program, which allowed them to understand in a softer way this new language. So, and then I think the teachers are very, very used now to have these new children coming from all over the world. And then maybe for the Europeans it's not that hard as the Asian people, because they have classmates from China, from South Korea, from everywhere, and they don't speak any English. So they it takes like almost 2 years for them to switch to English, because also the writing is completely different.
Right.
So at the beginning, yes, I was a little bit anxious for my kids, but then really the first first day of school, it was everything disappeared. So they really felt comfortable, and then they went by their school bus. They had fun from the beginning. So actually, I don't have any issue with them.
Sounds good. Very happy to hear that. What about you, Charles, and your children?
Yeah, I think I mean, there are certain things about Singapore which do make it easier for parents and for children, really. So the whole piece around the feeling of security and safety, and my kids cycle to school, and we don't worry about that. They take public transport, and again, we don't worry about that. And so there are lots of things that are not stressful and enable them to have their freedoms, which work really well. I think you hit the nail on the head, though, Alberini, which is the big thing is how's their friend group, and have they got some good buddies or not, and probably that's the one thing. If I ask any of my kids how their weeks was, and they say it hasn't gone well, it's generally because there's someone said something in the classroom, but generally they've managed to find new friends here. It turns out that a few of their friends from Hong Kong have also come to Singapore around the same time, so that's actually worked really well. So overall, it's been a pretty easy transition for them and for us. Yeah, I think the friends is the key part to it. Being able to have people they can share their experiences with, and that seems to be working just fine.
Great, thank you very much. And I hope that, of course, with, the relaxation of the I guess, COVID-19 measures, I hope both of you, I don't know whether it's going to be a happy problem, but I definitely hope you will be hosting more and more play dates for your children and your friends in the coming weeks to come. So yeah, I think that brings us to the end of the fireside chat. So thank you so much, Charles and Maria Pia, for sharing with us your stories and experiences regarding your move to Singapore. I mean, I'm so happy to hear that you're enjoying your stay in Singapore thus far. So on behalf of Singapore Global Network and Expatland, thank you so much for joining us today at the Moving to Singapore Forum. And thank you for tuning in, and goodbye, and have a lovely day ahead.
Thank you, Alberini. And also my thanks to Charles and Maria for their insights. That brings us to the end of our Moving to Singapore Forum. It was a pleasure to host the event, and thank you all for attending. On our website, there are a whole host of resources that will give you further information about moving to Singapore. Our e-team members are profiled there, their businesses, and information about each business. Also, you can download our book, Expatland, to give you further things to think through when planning your move. Please do not hesitate to contact either Boon Tan or myself if you have any questions about moving to Singapore. Thanks. Enjoy the journey.